What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions of Triangle Strategy, a TRPG or SRPG that just released yesterday from the time of this video from Square Enix. It's my understanding that this particular game was actually developed by the same team that worked on Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler, and those games share a sort of similar art style. Now, this is a game I wasn't originally intending to take a look at, but enough people asked me about it that I kind of just decided to. That said, we've been a bit spoiled for TRPG releases lately, and the game itself had actually released on other platforms previously, so it was kind of something people already knew about. Now, this particular game is about the precarious political machinations between three kingdoms who all control a certain amount of resources and regularly see themselves involved in a resource war, which is kind of the general setup for the story. And first impressions wise, this game is very, very story heavy. My first few hours with the game, I only played through like one actual combat mission, and the rest was just almost pure dialogue. It did start to pick up after that, but that intro was very slow. But once you get past that intro, the game itself actually has a lot going on. So your main character is a guy named Serenoa, who recently took up his father's position as lord of one of the three kingdoms. In service to the actual king of said region, he's a lord of one particular area, and that's kind of where the game kicks off. And then, of course, naturally, being a TRPG, we then very quickly meet a ton of allies along the way. But while that's where the story starts, what impresses me a bit here actually is that there appears to be quite a bit of choice and consequence, if you will, as there seems to be quite a few different paths through the game. And once you get a certain ways into it, this actually takes the form of voting, whereas instead of just straight up choosing which option, you actually have to persuade your allies who then kind of all vote on what to do, which is how the choice gets made, which I actually kind of like because it incentivizes part of the exploration of the game. So in addition to the actual battles, you will occasionally be able to explore a certain area, typically right where you're about to fight, talk to all the local inhabitants, that type of stuff, who can then give you information about various subjects that you'll then be able to use to persuade the other people on your team when you go to make a vote. So kind of excited to see just how in-depth the, again, choice and consequence winds up being in this particular game, but very cool that it's here. And the last thing I want to talk about for this first impressions video is actually the combat itself. Overall, pretty much what you'd expect from a turn-based tactical game. They do use a initiative order for the combat itself, so it's not a team situation, as is often the case with these games. So it's a mix of you and the enemy going at various times, which can then be affected by various buffs and debuffs, that kind of thing. But there's also a lot of other minor mechanics that I'm a really big fan of, such as backstabs being a guaranteed critical, which makes the direction your characters are facing very important. There are also follow-up attacks, which is essentially when you're flanking someone. Both characters on opposite ends of the enemy can then attack together to do extra damage. And there are environmental effects that seem relatively fleshed out, actually. There's also a high ground mechanic. If you're attacking from high ground, you'll deal extra damage as well. And that's kind of just scratching the surface level stuff. There's all sorts of stuff around the progression of weapons, how you get extra abilities. And overall, I'm loving the actual tactics of this game. The combat is a lot of fun to engage with. And that doesn't actually surprise me too much because it's very reminiscent of one of my favorite games, that is Original Sin 2. As that particular game has a lot of these exact same mechanics, so unsurprisingly the combat felt very similar for me as I've played Divinity Original Sin 2 a great deal, and this is again very similar. But that's where I'm going to leave it for the first impressions. Overall, pretty impressed with what I'm seeing here. Which is good because the asking price for this game is $60, and if it can follow through on the choice and consequence and things, I could absolutely see paying $60 for this as being pretty reasonable, because so far I'm having a great time and it seems like there's a lot to do. But with all that said, guys, there's my first impressions of Triangle Strategy, enjoying it quite a bit, looking forward to diving deeper into it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.